Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amour de Soi Wellness, and Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hi everyone, welcome to Happy Talks. Today we are going to talk about public speaking and how to be effective and not freak out during it. So, Donovan, what are your thoughts about public speaking, or what experience have you had with it?
Yeah, so I think public speaking is something that makes a lot of people nervous, myself included. In fact, I would guess by far the majority of people are nervous about public speaking. I imagine it has something to do with just having the full attention of a room or a group of people. Mm-hmm. And instead of, other social situations where you can kind of do something and maybe some people will notice and maybe they won't, there's a little more flexibility. In a public speaking setting, the attention is definitely on you. And I think people feel a lot of pressure from that and expect or want themselves to perform really, really well.
Right.
But I've noticed that some of the little mistakes that happen in the times that I've done public speaking don't get portrayed as much to the audience. Of course, there are times where it's a complete train wreck and it actually is roughly as bad as it seems. But for the most part, I don't think that's true. And so you're asking about my personal experience. I think I've gone through a pretty long journey of slowly figuring out the tools that I need to get a little bit better at public speaking. And I think one of the most important pieces has been just to recognize that you can kind of recover at any point, right? It doesn't minor little hiccups and flubs unless you're a world-class speaker and it's your job to speak from place to place. People aren't expecting super amazing, awesome, perfectly timed stories and everything to be like a TED Talk, rehearsed a million times. But there are definitely some things that you can do to take it from, I didn't prepare at all, now I'm just here and talking about random stuff, to okay, I have a little bit of preparation, it's a little bit polished, it's nicer. The other thing is, I don't know if the fear or the anxiety part ever goes away. Maybe it does for some people who do it all the time. But I think it's more about managing that feeling. I don't think that it's oh, now I'm just going to go speak and I feel totally fine and everything's awesome. For most people. Again, for some people that may be the case. But I know for me, at least, as I do it more and more, I get more and more tools for managing that butterflies in the stomach feeling, more and more for oh, what if I say the wrong thing? I think it's more about getting the tools in place to manage the feeling instead of expecting it to go away. And I think that's one thing that really holds people up a lot of times. A lot of times I hear people I'm nervous and I'm never going to not be nervous. So I don't think this is something I can do. But I think it's more realistic to think about how to actually manage those emotions. And I think the majority of people get nervous while public speaking, at least, from my memory. I recall hearing people who do it even a lot, still feel the feelings. They just know how to push through it. Mm-hmm. So that's some of my initial thoughts on the subject. What about you?
Yeah, I've kind of grown a lot in this arena, but I still know I have to grow even further because I am absolutely guilty. I think I notice that I say or so a lot, my filler words, and I didn't even recognize it until I was doing a presentation, a workshop really, on either weight or stress or something for the general public. And my friend who was in the class just kind of pointed that out for me. And I was oh, I'm going to be a doctor. I have to be professional sounding and intentional with my speaking. And I just didn't realize how, yes, I'm from California and sometimes I sound like a California girl. And I don't want that necessarily all the time. So it kind of propelled me to join Toastmasters, which is an international organization. They have clubs all over the country and the world focused on public speaking. And I joined that with the intention of being able to lecture more professionally. And it really made a difference because you get a lot of feedback from your peers and where you can improve and how you can be more effective. And I guess one of my biggest fears is not necessarily saying all the filler words all the time, but not really getting my message across as well as I could, or just being powerful and effective in the message. Or actually, I guess it's more like I'm afraid of boring people. I've sat through so many boring talks and lectures, and I'm just like snooze fest. And I wanted to commit myself to not be boring. try to be a little more lively and engaged and exciting, and make it more interactive if I can. So that's what I try to accomplish. And, you know, it's always a work in progress. And if I'm not practicing this skill consistently, which is kind of why I like this show we've created, because it forces me to practice my skills on a weekly basis, which is good for me because, you know, if you don't practice it, you lose it. But as far as ways, I think what you mentioned about the anxiety, for me, I don't think it, even though I've been doing this for years, I too still get the butterflies, like even if it's just in front of a few people, or if it's in front of 100 people, or it really, it's like, it's always there. Even if I've practiced a million times, I'm still like, what if my brain freezes and I just don't know what to say and everything just evaporates out of my brain? One thing I've discovered in that is, actually, I remember an incident where I was in this leadership training weekend course, and I got picked to present a part of the introduction presentation to like 200 of my peers in this leadership program. And usually I had been practicing the sections on my own, but with the manual, with the book. I had never actually practiced that section without the manual. And they were like, you're going to do it without the manual. And I was like, and I knew it was coming. And when I knew I was going to have to do it in maybe 10 or 20 minutes, I looked at my friend across the row, and I was like, the look of horror just was like, oh my God, I have to present in front of 200 people a section that I've never practiced before. And I got up on stage. I'm freaking out, and I'm like stumbling my way through it. I'm looking like a total, it was a train wreck essentially. And, you know, the coaches are there, like the leaders are there to kind of train you. It's all our training. It's a training weekend. So we're there to be trained. And I was on stage being trained, and they were like, pause there, take a breath, and, you know, keep going. You know this. And just be out there with people and stop being in your head about it. And I realized when I'm in my head about it, because I was anxious about messing it up and not getting it right and not saying it in the right order, I was just so caught up in myself, in my inner dialogue, that I just couldn't be out there with people. And I was not ready or prepared sufficiently, but, you know, when I actually, and so I stumbled my way through it, but I did kind of remember like the last section of it. And I remember that I actually took a breath and I looked out at the audience. I was like, I finally somehow got out of my head. I looked out in the audience. I could see my peers, and I could see that they're not judging me, that they were like, in their eyes, I could see that they were cheering me on. And they were like, thank God that doesn't have to be me. What? I was like, right. So I just saw them like just really being supportive with their eyes and just like encouraging with their eyes. And that just like empowered me. And I delivered the last 2 lines super powerfully and strong. And it was just an incredible experience. And when I finally just got out of my head, just did my best, and just was out there with people. And that's what it really is. It's like, are you connecting with your audience? That's a really big factor. And you might mess up your words, but really, I think connecting with your audience, are they engaged? Are like reading the audience, I think, is a big part of that, and getting out of your head.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking about how public speaking is kind of talked about as one thing, but it's actually a whole basket of skills.
Right.
And it's a whole series of different things. As you were talking, I was just kind of thinking, like, depending on what you're trying to do, there are different pieces to work on. And I think what you were just talking about is the one that gets people the most, which is staying in their head and getting so nervous and worried about how they're performing that takes over all their attention, and they have no attention left to actually give the speech.
Right.
And I've noticed for me, like, when I'm most comfortable speaking is when I'm not in my head and I'm really focused on the material and just sharing it out. Going back a couple steps, like, I still have that fear before I start, but in the times that it goes well, as soon as I start speaking, as soon as I get into the topic, then I'm ready to go and I feel much better because I'm able to, not every time, but like move out of my head and into the topic. And I think that's an important like piece, like you were saying, to get out of your head. Because once you do that, even if you don't have some of the other skills super polished, even if you don't have, perfect speech, you have ums, likes, in there,
Yes.
people are going to at least be able to get that first piece of connection, which is just where you're talking like a normal person, where you're actually delivering a message in a way that feels natural to you. And I feel like a lot of people have an idea in their head of like, I have to be this.
Right.
And like you were saying, like, I have to get it exactly in order and I have to do this part and I have this memorized and then this comes next. And in certain contexts, you may have like a script or something that you're supposed to be following. But a lot of the time, you can just kind of go off the cuff a little bit, go a little bit out of order, do whatever else without people really noticing. Or even if they do, it being a minor piece of the experience. But I want to hone in a little bit on what I like this spectrum of skills, right? Like I feel like there's a bunch of different things that go into public speaking. There's being prepared, right? And there's a range which goes from like what you were saying, something that's kind of memorized or like material you've studied, or like very, very scripted presentations, or there's just like off the cuff, hey, now it's your turn to go up and speak. And like I feel like that's like one bucket of skills, which is just preparation or being able to put words together. I feel like there's another bucket of skills which is around how you actually speak, like you were saying, the ums, uhs, stuff like that. I feel like there's another bucket of skills around your actual vocal quality or tone, or basically how much you project. There's another bucket of skills around kind of your body language, what you do, how you move around. So I think it could actually be really useful. And I haven't done this before very much consciously, but I have done it in practice, but hone in on the pieces that I've struggled with and work on those. Like, I think that could really help people get through some of the problems that they're having if they recognize where they're strong and where they're weak. Because I would guess that most people have, a balance of strengths and weaknesses across the various attributes that it takes to public speak well. I guess another bucket of skills, now that I'm thinking about it, is content too. Like you were saying, something interesting, right? If you can structure your content or give it enough life, but you can't speak super, super well, you still can get enough attention and still give a pretty decent presentation. So I think, that could be one thing to look at as people are trying to think about public speaking and look for places. Again, I'm going to guess the number one spot is that initial fear. And working through that and not letting that bleed into the entire presentation. But I think skilling up in some of the other areas might help reduce or make that a little more manageable.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I think another aspect that it kind of falls into that content realm of, making it interesting, but also like focusing on what is the intention that you want to bring to whatever you're speaking about. And if you can always just go back to that, and that kind of can help you get out of your head of like, how am I doing? Being like, yeah, maybe I'm not saying all the words in the perfect order in the exact way that it's structured. But instead of freaking out about that, actually focusing on like, okay, what was my mission that I wanted to accomplish? Like, what value did I want to bring to the people that I'm going to be speaking to? And just, helping you, if you completely blank deer in the headlights, to go back to like, what was my intention? Maybe I'm not going in the right order, but if I can get back to my intention, can maybe get it back on track to where it needs to go, essentially.
Yeah, I think also, now that I'm thinking about it, the point of public speaking, for the most part, unless you're just practicing public speaking, is to get ideas across, right? Like, I've never gone to something and watched someone speak and hoped that I could focus on how well they're speaking or how many ums they say or how many likes they say or anything like that. I want the content.
Right.
So that may be a useful way to reframe it too, because people aren't really there to judge you. They're not there to go, oh, well, they kind of slouched a little bit while they gave this presentation, so now I hate the whole thing, right? People, for the most part, want the ideas. So if you can focus on getting into that mind space instead of thinking like, I'm going to be judged for how I'm doing, and focus on how can I get these ideas across? How can I get these ideas out to the audience? And like you were saying, connect with them.
Yeah.
That's maybe a better place to start from, or at least a place to try to get into mentally before giving a presentation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. It's hard because you want to do your best, but then you get caught up in the like, am I being judged? What are they thinking? And all of that. And it's just like, no, just look at them. Eye contact makes a difference. And I think, the other thing I wanted to add to that was the idea of clarity of the message, and another aspect to kind of refine, which I'm still working on that. I can ramble for days, and to be an effective speaker requires you to be able to say your message so clearly in the least amount of words as possible. And sometimes I'm like struggling with all these different words, and then people get lost and they have no idea what I'm talking about. So that is something I'm continuously trying to refine, is being able to get the message across very clearly. And that's not always easy. Yes.
Yeah, it's good we have an editor, because I find myself rambling for a long time, and then at the end of it, rephrasing it into one sentence that encapsulates the past 3 minutes of rambling.
What I really needed to say could have, in 5 minutes, could have been 1 minute, really. Yeah.
So I would be curious, let's say that you have some sort of a speech upcoming. What do you do to prepare? How do you get ready to do some sort of public speaking?
Yeah. I have to be honest that I don't know if this is everyone, but I have a resistance to preparing. And I don't know why, because I know, I will prepare, but I am always like, I don't want to prepare. I will, but I just like, oh yeah. Or, they say like some methods to really be really prepared is to record yourself on video. And I don't know, there's just like this mental block that I'm still trying to like get over, that yes, I don't like watching myself on video for some reason, but I know if I watch myself, this is how, Michael Jordan operated in enhancing his game in basketball. And obviously that's how he became the best during his time, was like he would watch replays, tapes of him, performing and seeing like, okay, where can I improve? What could I do different? What would this move do? And, watching yourself, I think maybe it's the self-critical part, like, oh, I don't want to watch myself like mess it up real bad, so I don't want to record myself. But, I think it's a valuable tool, and I am starting to get more comfortable with it. Just being like, yeah, it's okay. It's better to mess up in the privacy of your own home than in front of 100 people. So it's probably a good idea, but it is challenging. I think getting past the resistance of preparing in the way that I should, or just preparing. It doesn't even have to be a video. You could just prepare in front of like some friends and get some feedback that way. But I think it's hard to really know without, you could do it on yourself in front of a mirror too. That's another way. But I kind of like to get some feedback before. If it was a really important, like if I was actually doing a TED Talk, I would absolutely want to prepare 100 times in front of people and see how it like comes across. But if it was just like, oh, I'm just recording a HappyTalks episode, I'm like, whatever, just, we're having fun, and it can be edited. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I think for me, it's a matter of what the context is and how well I know the topic I'm expected to speak on.
Right.
So if you want me to talk about public speaking and just give my random thoughts off the top of my head, then great. I'll just record it with no previous thoughts and just kind of let it flow. Like I know some minor things about public speaking enough to talk on the topic. If you were to give me, I don't know, like dolphins, like if you're like, tell me some stuff about dolphins, I would really need to prepare for a presentation like that, because I don't know anything off the top of my head. I know nothing. So that's one piece for me, is just like how comfortable I am with the material and how easily I could speak off the cuff. I do think it is somewhat noticeable when people are talking about a topic that they don't know anything about. And depending on the context, if there's like room for questions or something and you don't know the topic, then that really sets yourself up just for a bad time. So I think it is important to practice and study more depending on how well you know the topic. And then what you were saying around practicing, just like getting reps in, I think is extremely important. Again, depending on the context of the speech you want to give and how polished it needs to be. But like you were saying, I think recording or other people is better feedback than doing it in front of the mirror. Because yes, if you do it in front of the mirror, you get the rep. But in the other modes, you can actually get feedback. You can actually see things that did or did not go well. And I think that's one thing that holds people up that infrequently do public speaking, is that they don't ever put themselves in a situation to actively pay attention to problems or areas they would like to work on. And so they just end up making the same mistakes. And again, like if you're just practicing in the mirror, you're not going to catch, I mean, you might, but you're probably not going to catch anything. When you watch a video, which totally understand can be painful. I remember when I was first recording videos and watching them, every second was agonizing. Just horrible. Like, this is what I sound like. This is how I move.
Oh no.
Everything just, but it fades. The more times you do it, it really does fade. And now I can watch stuff, and if I do something weird or mess up, I still cringe a little bit, but it's not like this. I remember kind of the fear from before, or like just like, I don't want to watch myself because I'm going to have to grapple with the way that I act in the world, and it's weird and I don't like it. But for stuff like this, it's really probably the best way to see what you can change.
Right.
And you can also combine the things you were talking about, which is record yourself and have someone watch it to give you feedback. For those that don't want to like do it face to face, you can kind of get a middle ground of like recording and then sending it to someone, because sometimes in person is a lot of pressure. Again, it all just depends on the context and where you're trying to do it. But I think those are the two like big things, is how well you know the topic beforehand and just getting reps in to make sure that it can flow out in the way that you expect it to. I don't know about you, but I've given some presentations where like, I know this. And then I go to do it and I'm like, and today is a topic with words. Like I've definitely done that a few times by under preparing.
Yeah, that can happen. I think it helps if you kind of have I don't always like to script out I used to in the beginning of recording videos. I would just script out everything, and I had to get everything in the exact order of it. And if it didn't, that would result in like me trying to create a 2-minute video, like 60 takes that would take like 4 hours. And I was like, I could not spend this much time on 2 minutes of content. This is just not okay. So it's just not working for me. But really just like, what are the main points that I want to touch on? And I know those points, like once I see the bullet or whatever, or think of the bullet, like then I could speak on that instead of just going blank. So I don't always usually structure things out, but just having like some ideas in my back of my mind, so I could always go to that in case I freeze up.
Yeah, I don't know what your experience with this has been, but for me, things that I scripted. So at first, like I would script stuff just because I thought I should. And then I slowly started to move into more free flow, like bullet points and stuff. But I also realized that I would start scripting more the less I knew the topic. So if I didn't feel comfortable kind of going off the cuff and like, here's a bullet point, I can talk about this for a while, I would write these scripts out.
Right.
And looking back, it's made me realize like I didn't need to get tighter with like, I'm going to say this exact word, then this exact word. I needed to get more familiar with the message that I was trying to get across. And that helped me a lot, because then I didn't have to try to memorize this long, specific thing. Like it's at least for me, really hard to memorize specific sequences of words. Mm-hmm. But if I just got into the idea a little bit more and got more comfortable, like I would practice giving like little off the cuff talks about certain bullet points until I felt comfortable. Like, oh, okay, whenever this comes up, I may say it one of 6 ways. It's the same thing, but then I don't have to memorize like verbatim this script. So that's something I saw. I don't know if that resonates for you at all, but I saw like, oh, the more I want to script, the less I probably know about this thing, or at least the less clear my message probably really is.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're not familiar with the topic or you're still learning it yourself, and sometimes that is me, where I'm like, oh, I have to give a presentation on this, and I really beginner level and I want to seem like I sort of know what I'm talking about, then I have to do like a ton of back research and get familiar with it and comfortable with it, where I could, speak about it. And sometimes I will like write things out, like what are the big things that I want to script it out, but then kind of like taking all of that content and then refining it into like bullet points, because I've hopefully read through that enough or practiced it enough, then eventually I can refine it into the bullet points after I've become familiar enough with the content.
And I do think there is a big difference between structuring and scripting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
all talks, well, not all of them, but talks should, for the most part, have structure.
Oh yeah.
Like if it's a public speech that you're giving somewhere, for the most part, there should be like a clear message you're trying to get across. There should be some points. There should be a flow, like start, middle, and end. But I just wanted to clarify that what we're talking about is like scripting out every single word. Like there should definitely be some structure, and it helps so much to know, like, I want to hit this point, then I want to hit this point, then I want to hit this point.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to script out every single word. You can find kind of like a flow to get that structure out without using a script.
Right. It just made me think of, I remember being in Toastmasters, and it's encouraged to not have your notes in front of you, but, something if it's like a really detailed information that you need to reference your notes, that sometimes has to happen. Like you have to be able to kind of look through it. But some people would just be like standing there, just reading it, not out there, but just like reading it. And that's kind of like, that takes away from the connecting with the audience, and you're just reading it. And it's just like, you could just hand out the paper to everyone if you just want, if that makes it easier. But I think, that's the danger of notes and having too much. But if it was just the bullet point, if you had practiced enough beforehand, you can be like, oh yeah, this is the topic and I can speak on that. And this is, and I don't always like remember everything that I had planned to say, but they don't know that. They don't know that. So just like, yeah. So just establishing the bullet points, and yeah, I have some various messages within each bullet point, but and sometimes they get missed and sometimes not, but I do try. And I am still guilty sometimes. I'm like, oh, do I know this that well? And I need to be reading it. And that's my sign. If I'm like in my notes, then I have to realize I have to practice a lot more. It's my indicator.
Yeah, I think that is one of the quickest ways to tank a presentation is basically just making a group of people watch you read something.
Right. I know. So
like that's not a presentation. That's what it is. It's people watching you read.
It's
and
like reading. Yeah.
It's even worse. I think this is extremely common on PowerPoints.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's just, hey, I'm going to read you these slides. So, but why? Like, no one wants you to read them something. Like, if the best way to get the message across is that text that's on there and it fills everything and it's enough, then just the text should suffice. Like, you shouldn't have to read it to people because people can read. So if you find that you're basically just reading slides, something is missing. It's either too scripted or the message isn't abstracted to a point where you can just kind of, put a couple bullet points and then talk about it. Or there's just more work that needs to be done there. And I really think it goes back to kind of the nervousness thing, right? It's like, I'm too nervous to come up with ideas, but I can read this and this will tell me exactly what to say, which I totally understand, but it'd make for a very bad presentation.
Yeah. Just to be upfront with, yes. If you notice yourself reading, stop it, practice. Yes. I feel like everyone's been through a presentation where the presenter is just reading exactly what's on the PowerPoint, and it just makes it feel dry. And then they're not engaged with the audience at all. So they're not really connecting. And it's just like, you could have just emailed this presentation out to everyone and we could have just read it that way. So yeah, I try to make it, if I am doing a PowerPoint, which I do sometimes try to steer away from, but sometimes you do need to like provide some images and other things. But if I'm providing wording, it's like ideal to just have, if you have bullet points, like at most 2 or 3 on a slide, not like a whole page of like I'm reading a novel from it's just like you're gonna lose your audience like real quick. They're gonna tune out, and then the message is not gonna get across. So just making it short and succinct, and then you can obviously expand on whatever that short, sweet, couple word bullet point was, and throw in a lot of pictures. I love pictures. I always throw in pictures. Be like, oh, look at that cute bunny. Yeah, change it up. Yeah,
It adds the right type of visual element when you just add, a little bit of stuff. And I want to be clear that if you just have a bullet point and it's short and you end up saying what's on the slide, that's not like the worst thing ever. What is not very engaging is when you're reading a lot of stuff off of a slide. The other thing that happens when you're doing a bunch of reading and stuff instead of kind of creating a presentation is you end up with body language and projection that are not good. Mm-hmm. So I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in where someone is talking like this while they're reading the slides and they're not facing the audience at all.
I know, I see that too.
And, it cuts like at least half of the projection because you're facing the wrong way. It's like you were saying, you don't connect with the audience because you're not even looking at them. And then same thing if you're like your head down reading, same thing. Like you can't project very well from that posture. Now, like you could potentially sit up straight and look out and project and still be reading, but I guess it's a little bit separate of an issue. Like it's possible, but it's not really the path you want to go down.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it depends if you're in television or something and you have to read a teleprompter, like the news, then that's another thing. But at least then you're still like looking out toward people.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess my point there was it doesn't automatically make your posture the worst thing ever. And it doesn't automatically make it so you don't project. But if you're not intentional about it, for most people, it quickly turns it into, okay, now I'm facing the wrong way, or now I'm hunched over, or all these different things that may not seem like they make that much of a difference, but do impact the way that you project and the way that you present and just how people are able to absorb the message.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. And that can actually make me think of another point that's important that we touch on in Toastmasters is if you're able to move around a little, that actually kind of creates more engagement that way versus you standing at a podium. Actually, it's called a lectern. Learned in Toastmasters, a lectern. If you're just standing there of every statue, like you're gonna start to lose people. Or if you are stuck in one spot and you're not able to move around, at least hand gestures and engage your body more, and that draws people in.
You can just tell when people are talking about stuff. Mm-hmm. If they're not very interested in it themselves.
Yes.
And not always, because some people aren't naturally wired this way to move around while they talk. But a lot of the time, like for a lot of people, once you're engaged and passionate, at least to some level, right? Like you don't have to be completely in love with the stats to do your business meeting. Like, but at least if you have some level of interest and engagement, then for a lot of people, you naturally start moving around a little bit more. So if you can find ways to tap into that excitement around the topic and again get out of your head a little bit more, that comes across a lot more engaging because people can see you're interested. And if you're giving off body language that says you're not interested, then no one else is going to be interested. So that's why adding some of these like body movements and a little bit more motion can help draw people in.
Totally. Yes.
So I did have one more thing that I wanted to cover real quick that goes along with the same lines. I have noticed that some people presenting in work context mostly, their volume is way too low given the size of the room. One thing that I found has been helpful, or people have told me is helpful, is imagining like you are talking to the person specifically furthest away from you in the room. And that has helped people gauge kind of the volume level and the projection level a little bit better. Because a lot of times what I've seen is people talking like they're talking to the person next to them, which makes it really hard for other people to hear. So just switching the mindset just a touch to say like, I need to act as though I'm speaking to this guy all the way on the other side of the room. that has helped a lot of people get their projection and volume levels right.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually hadn't thought of that, because when I realized that usually if I'm on stage presenting, I admit I'm mostly looking at the front row, like people in the front, like beginning, and then it's just like the back is kind of a sea of people. So realizing that you do, but I mean, it depends on the room. If really big room, then you need a mic, obviously. But even if it was just like 10 people, and realizing, yeah, there's people back there. That's kind of why I like to move. If I have the capability of like walking around to the back and like engaging with them, I will do that if I get that freedom. Yes.
At a high level, there are many different skills that you can work on, and tapping into the ones that are most relevant for you will probably help the most. I know in the past I have seen public speaking as just this one block, this one single skill. And through kind of talking through it today, I see now that there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 skills. Honing into the specifics will probably produce better outcomes than generically looking for like, how do I do better public speaking? Because you might get body language stuff, you might get speech stuff, you might get presentation or content stuff. So knowing which one you're actually looking for can really help you hone in on the things that you want to improve.
Yeah. Actually, it made me think of one last point I wanted to make, is just like, I hear a lot of people say this is all a mindset thing of like, I'm just a bad public speaker. I'm a terrible public speaker. It's just not my thing. And it's just, no, I mean, not everyone's like, a lot of people are not natural public speakers. And if you're willing to commit, and then if you ask those people like, well, how many times did you practice? It's like, no, I didn't. I'm once. Or it's just like, yeah, if you practice it 100 times, then you'd probably like pull it off pretty well, potentially. I can't say for sure, but your likelihood of messing it up. But if you're in the mindset, well, I'm just bad at this, so I'm just not even going to bother. And you realize how limiting that is for you, because at some point or another, most people, whether it's in school or work situation, not everyone's going to be on stage doing TED Talks, but for the most part, we have to present at some point in our lives for most people. And it's just like, if you're just going to be intimidated by that and just kind of resign that you are a bad public speaker, then of course you're going to remain a bad public speaker. But it's just kind of like running. This is something that, I know, Hal Elrod.
Oh yeah, Miracle Morning.
Yeah, Miracle Morning. He talks about like, because I was always like, I'm not a morning person, I'm a night person. And the analogy he used was, well, that's how, like, if you were to, like, and I also say the same thing, I'm not a runner, I don't run, I hate running, all of that. And he was like, well, if you got up every morning and you ran every single day, one day, like for a few months, consistently every day for months, same thing with the morning. If you got up every morning at a certain time for months consistently and committed yourself to that, if that's something that was important to you, then like one day you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm a morning person. Oh, I'm a runner. And it's just like, you have to put in the work. You have to be committed to putting in the work. And then one day, if you give enough really bad public speeches, enough, like we're talking 10, 15, 20, 50, 100, like enough. You have to be willing to suck at least 100 times. And then you can be like, I'm actually a decent public speaker. Maybe. Or even I'm a really great public speaker. But you have to be willing to suck, I think. And just, if you have to stop saying like, I'm a bad public speaker, and letting that be your excuse to not practice and get better at it, because it's a valuable skill to have.
Yeah, I think if it's something that's important to you, and again, that goes to like all of the things we talk about, if it's important to you and it's causing you some kind of problem or unhappiness or stress or anxiety, then it's something worth investing time into. And you can't expect, I think public speaking is one of the skills that people feel like there is some set of naturals that just exist. And if you're not a natural, then it's not going to happen. And I don't think that's true. I think it's the same as many, if not most other skills.
Right.
Whereas, like you were saying, like if you never played basketball before and you're like, I suck at basketball, I'm not a basketball player. And it's like, well, you probably have to do it. And you develop the skill. Probably the best way to develop the public speaking skill is just repetitions. Like,
Right.
the biggest thing is probably just getting out there. Most people probably don't have enough reps public speaking to really build up their skills in a way, right? Like, if you have to do it once every 6 months, once a year, you're not really getting enough reps to build up the skills that you need. And then, beyond that, you can kind of hone into those more specific skills. But the biggest thing, again, same as like if you were playing a sport, like if you only played basketball every year, once a year, like you're not going to get good because you're not doing it. So if public speaking is something that's important to you and it's impacting your life in a way that is the skills that you have right now are impacting your life negatively, then you have to find more opportunities to kind of bring it up. And again, with like everything we talk about, at least from my perspective, if it's not important to you, if it's not impacting your life, if you never have to give speeches and it doesn't matter, then it's not necessarily something you have to invest in. But for most people, tuning up these skills just a little bit, maybe not like a huge investment, but a little bit of tuning can really help ease some situations that are otherwise very stress-inducing.
Right, exactly. Yes. And, if it's, I agree with your point. If it's not that important to you, you don't necessarily have to hone in that skill. But if your job is giving a presentation every week, maybe that's something, and you like flip out every time, then maybe that's the time to really like explore, committing yourself to doing the reps and the practice. That's really, really what it takes. And, everyone has like, they come in with a different level of skills, but, everyone, even like the best of the best, they just don't go in without any practice and are just like amazing. Like every TED Talk speaker has practiced like over and over and over and over again. It wasn't just like, I'll just see what happens and get on stage, like let it rip. Yeah, no, it's repetition and practice and the commitment to practice. Mm-hmm.
And I think I mentioned it before, but I think that's what people see. People see the end result of people who have practiced a ton. Right. And they don't see all the practice, and they don't see all the failed attempts, and they don't see all the progress. They just see, look at this person who's giving an amazing speech. Like, this is crazy. This person, they just must be a natural at this. Like, I can never do that. When you miss all the steps in between. It actually reminds me of, like, many, many years ago, I met a musician, a rapper, and I was like, how do you do this? This is crazy. And he's like, man, all you got to do is put in the work. You just put in the work every day. And before you know it, you'll be at least this good. And at the time, I was like, okay, sure. But it's just like every skill falls in this bucket. Like, if you just put in the reps, and, people have like natural ranges or like natural dispositions or whatever. But if you just put in the reps on anything, you're going to get better. So public speaking is no different. It's not some innate skill. There are pieces that you can practice and get better at if it's something that you think is important.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. Well, I think that's our show for today. As I flub over in my public speaking show. I don't know if I should edit that out or not. You could keep it. I think it's actually good for people to see us F it up sometimes. So you can keep that in this episode, because that is what it is to be human beings. That I'm willing to mess it up sometimes so I can continue to improve. So thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next week.